Welcome, everybody. This is Amy Pensby. I'm the Director of Licensing Services. I'd like to call this meeting to order. It's the September 22nd, 2020 New York State Hearing Aid Dispensing Advisory Board meeting. Because of the ongoing public health crisis, Governor Cuomo had issued an executive order that allows us to temporarily have modified open meeting law, allows us to hold meetings in this format. This isn't forever, but this is just a temporary solution. In order to do this, I'm going to request the members of the public can call in as well as the board members. So I'm going to ask everybody just to mute your phone unless you're speaking to prevent any kind of feedback and interruption with the meeting. Okay, so I'm going to start with the roll call. I'm going to name each board member, and if you could just indicate that you're present. Okay, so Ann Orsini.
Present.
Florence Butler. Jerry Bergman.
Yes, I can hear you. Barely, but I can hear you. I still don't have captions.
Okay, sorry about that, Jerry.
All right, just so you know.
Yeah. Anthony Macera.
Yes, I'm here.
Zanita Shapiro.
I'm here.
Peter Fisher. Eric Friedman.
Here.
Anna Kim. Jason Kramer from Department of Education.
I'm here.
Anita Vigorito.
I'm here. Happy autumn, everyone.
Yes, same to you. And is there a representative from Letitia James, the Attorney General's office, present? Okay. Okay, Denise, was Peter Fisher initially on the call, and are we waiting for him to dial back in?
Peter Fisher? Oh, he's back in. Great.
It should be.
You there, Peter?
I see my name up on the participants. Can you hear me?
No video. I can hear you.
Still can't get video.
Good.
Okay, I'll just use the mic.
Peter, it would help if we can see you.
I know. I've already been on 2 browsers and I can't get the camera to work.
Oh, okay.
Hi, this is Dana. I'm sorry to interrupt, but if you can hear me, I'm putting the caption straight into chat.
We don't necessarily need everyone to access the video portion. You probably just want to state your name. Especially if you're listed as calling user.
I think the caption stopped again. Okay. Denise, are you with us?
I'm here, Jerry.
What are we waiting for now?
I'm not sure. Are we okay now? Dana, everything okay? I was trying to read Dana's captions.
I'm seeing the captions now in the chat column. Anyone wants, they can just click on chat.
Okay, then I guess we're ready to proceed. Thank you, Jerry. Amy, I think we're ready to proceed. This is Amy.
See me now?
For some reason, can you hear me now? Okay. So I'm just going to proceed with approval of the board meeting summaries from the 12/10/19 meeting and the 3/10/2020 meeting. Can I have a motion to approve these minutes?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Who made the first
Second.
motion? Okay, who made the motion to accept
I
the
did.
minutes?
Tony Massara.
Tony, and who seconded that, please?
Ann Orsini.
Okay, thank you. We have a quorum?
Do we?
Dave Mossberg, are you there? Okay, I believe we do have a quorum, so.
Hi, this is Dave. When I was listening to the roll call, I believe we only had 6 members present. I'm not sure if that's, we had 7? Okay, so as long as there's at least 7 members of the board that are here, that's enough to constitute a quorum. However, the secretary, as well as the representatives of DOE, Department of Health, and the OAG are non-voting members. So just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of that.
So that is a quorum, Dave?
If we have at least 7 of the 13 members, excluding the government positions, then there's enough of the quorum.
We have 6
So, like,
board members and 3 officio.
There's 6, did you hear that, Dave? We have 6 board members, and then we have 3 ex officio members. So that would not constitute a quorum?
No, because we would need, the board itself consists of only 13 members. The 13 members of the board are 4 non-audiologist hearing aid dispensers, 4 audiologist hearing dispensers, 2 otolaryngologists, and then 3 public members. So the 4 plus 4 plus 2 plus 3 equals the 13 members of the board.
Okay. All right, so based on that, not having a quorum, we can't approve the meeting summaries at this meeting. We'll have to wait to our next meeting. So we'll move forward with the department committee reports. Let's start with the enforcement report by Ernita Gant.
Amy?
Yes. Ernest will be giving a report today to the board.
What did you say, Ernita?
Ernest is going to give the report today. Ernest, are you on?
Okay.
Yes, I'm on. Can
Okay.
everyone hear me?
Lady will be presenting the enforcement report. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon. This enforcement report covers a period from April 2020 to August 2020. And over that time period, we received a total of 1 new complaint. Also during that time period, we closed 2 complaints. Of the ones that we closed, one was closed as a withdrawal. The plaintiff decided not to go forth with his complaint, and the second one was closed due to insufficient evidence. So our current caseload is 5 complaints. Looking at the type of complaints we have investigated, they would include allegations of unlicensed activity and requests for refund. The complainant made a deposit on a hearing aid and later wanted a refund. That's the enforcement report. Are there any questions?
Okay, thank you, Ernest. If there's no questions, we'll move on to the next department report. And that would be for processing. And we have Emily Lupi to present that report.
Good afternoon. This is Emily Lupi. Included in the materials you were provided, you will find licensing statistics for August 2019 and August 2020. The report shows the number of hearing aid businesses broken down by county, business lists broken down by class code or license type, and a report of hearing aid dispensers broken down by type and by county. The 2020 numbers include only licensees and do not include those licensees whose licenses may have expired and are covered by Executive Order 202.11, which allows individuals licensed by the Department of State to extend the expiration of their license during the state of emergency. Are there any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Can everybody mute their phones, please, or their so that we can hear? So the next report is the education report, which will be provided by Allison Lacey.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Allison Lacey. The Bureau of Educational Standards continues to audit hearing aid dispenser renewals. Those renewals which did not indicate approval code numbers or do not appear to include T-coil infection control and New York state and federal law, in addition to the balance of required hours, are not processed, and they're sent to the Bureau for an educational compliance audit. A renewal license will only be granted when satisfactory proof of education is provided. To date, 48 licensees have been audited and 44 have complied. Of the 4 non-complied, 2 are within the time frame to respond. Course availability appears to be adequate and has not been an issue raised by any of our licensees. Are there any questions?
Thank you. If there's no questions, we'll move on to the examination report. Shannon McGuire will present this report.
Shannon McGuire. I'm going to give you a report on the exam administration. On March 16th, the division suspended all licensing service exams due to the COVID-19 outbreak. Exams for the written hearing aid resumed in July. Our practical exams were piloted in Albany in July and have since resumed in all other locations. We have established some COVID-19 safety measures at our exam sites for our exam proctors, examiners, and examinees. Our exam proctors and examiners are responsible for ensuring that the capacity remains such that 6 feet distance can be maintained between exam candidates. Our exam proctors, examiners, and exam candidates are advised not to attend the exam if they have symptoms have been in contact with a confirmed or suspected COVID-19 positive person in the past 14 days, or if they themselves have tested positive in the last 14 days. We have COVID-19 safety precautions posted at all our exam sites. Masks are required to be worn at exam sites at all times. Our exam candidates are asked to sanitize their hands before and after each exam. We have now instructed all exam candidates to bring their own writing instrument to the exam. And those are some of the updates and changes that have been made due to COVID-19 to our exam administration. Are there any questions?
Okay, thank you. As all the board members can see, we've been very active due to the COVID that's going on in the public, and we've made a lot of arrangements with the department to try to comply with what's going on. So now we're going to move on to action items. So we have a representative here, John Haranon from DHR, and he's going to talk about how they enforce existing laws with regard to looping. John?
Yeah, hi. Good afternoon, everybody. Yeah.
Yes. Breaking up.
Mute.
John? John, can you hear me?
Welcome to WebEx. Enter your access code or meeting number followed by pound. Your attendee ID number followed by pound. This meeting is being recorded.
John?
Yeah.
Have your computer audio
Yeah, there's a terrible echo.
Yeah, turn one of the two off. There you go. There you go.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that, everybody. I'm still here.
Something is still on.
Hey, Amy, it's Paula. Do you want to skip over to me and give an opportunity to correct? And then circle back?
Sure, yeah. Paula, that's a good idea. We're going to, John, we're going to get back to you.
Okay.
Okay, Paula. Okay, so the next action item is for our Consumer Protection Director to talk about consumer awareness. Her name's Paula O'Brien. Paula?
Hi, everybody. I'm Paula with the Division of Consumer Protection. I'm not sure how long the, folks have been on the board, but formerly the Division of Consumer Protection was the State Consumer Protection Board, and we were statutorily ex officio members. And so we had a robust participation. And when we came over to the Department of State, we were no longer named in. We've been following, updates from the Division of Licensing, and I welcome the opportunity to connect in with you folks and to learn more about opportunities to further the consumer protection message around hearing aid purchases in New York State. So to that end, what we do is we have a robust outreach program. We have statewide, well, when we're when we're actually going out into the marketplace, we go throughout the state to provide outreach and education forums and presentations to help consumers save in the marketplace and to inform them of consumer protection laws to put that on.
I lost you.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
This is John Harry. Are we back to me, or are we still on another speaker? I apologize.
John, we can hear you now. Paula was speaking, but from Consumer Protection, but it appears that she got disconnected.
Okay.
So,
I don't hear the echo anymore.
No,
So-
I don't have the echo either. So why don't we start with John? Paula's back. So John, let's finish with Paula, and then we'll go to you, John. Okay.
That's fine. That's fine.
All right, Paula, please continue. Paula, can you hear me? It looks like Paula might be frozen. Paula? She looks like she's having an issue. Okay, John, let's start with you. John, can you please review your portion of this agenda?
Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, hear you.
Okay. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is John Harrian. I'm the Director of Disability Rights for the New York State Division of Human Rights. Very much appreciate this opportunity to be with you all this afternoon. I was asked to speak a little bit about how the this afternoon about how the division enforces the state human rights law, and also to speak specifically about a regulation that was shared with me that speaks to the requirement of places of public accommodation to have television television screens captioned in their establishment. So just to give a brief overview of how the agency operates, we enforce the New York State human rights law, and that prohibits discrimination in for a wide variety of protected classes, including disability. So last year we got over 6,000 complaints alleging various forms of discrimination. Close to a third of those complaints include allegations based on disability discrimination. So both disability and race are really the top two areas we see in terms of volume of complaints. So it's an area that we have a lot of work in. The way we enforce the law is by investigating, prosecuting, and adjudicating complaints of discrimination. We've been open for business, during the pandemic, although most staff are working remotely. We do have personnel in each of the offices around the state. And we've been receiving complaints in ways that are more accommodating to people, who don't have the ability to get into the office, et cetera. We've been taking complaints over the phone, taking them virtually. And we've also waived the notary requirement in order to, again, facilitate easier access to the division in terms of filing complaints. I mentioned disability as a protected class. One of the things I like to share with folks is that the definition of disability under the state human rights law is much more generous than under the federal Americans with Disabilities Act. So under the ADA, it requires a significant limitation of a major life impairment, a major life activity. Under the state human rights law, there's no such qualifiers. So somebody who may have a level of hearing impairment that's not substantial may not meet the federal standard, but that's not a concern under the state human rights law. We don't get hung up necessarily on how disabled you are. Rather, the focus is on whether or not discrimination is. So I share that distinction with folks so they understand that there is a broader net of protection for people who live in New York State, people with disabilities in New York State. We more generously cover them under the state human rights law. To To talk a little bit about the issue at hand that's relevant for folks on this board, a regulation, or I should say a provision in a statute that was added under the civil rights section of New York state law requires places of public accommodation to provide captioning on television screens. And it draws from our law on the definition of a place of public accommodation. And that also is a very generous definition. There are a few exemptions, but most places that are open to the public are covered as places of public accommodation under the New York State human rights law. Probably the biggest exemption are religious organizations, but we do take a look at them too if they're holding events that are open to the public. We do scrutinize those. But otherwise, again, it's a very broad definition. A place of public accommodation. However, that provision of the law, the civil rights law, is not a provision that is enforceable by the New York State Division of Human Rights. I believe under that section, you can bring a private cause of action, or you can ask the Attorney General's office to bring a cause of action. But that doesn't mean that you're out of luck when it comes to our agency. So although there's no explicit language in the state human rights law obligating owners of places of public accommodation to provide captioning, there is language in the state human rights law that clearly obligates owners of places of public accommodation to reasonably accommodate people with disabilities. And in that provision of the law, it talks about auxiliary aids and devices. And clearly, captioning would be a form of an auxiliary or aid or device that would allow somebody with a disability to participate or access goods or services in a place of public accommodation and be able to effectively communicate. That's the phrasing in the statute, effective communication. So again, while there's no explicit language in our law that exists in the civil rights section of the law, there is this obligation to reasonably accommodate. So if an individual were to go to a restaurant or go somewhere where there was a television screen or some type of a visually featured element, and they wanted that to be audibilized in some way or captioned in some way, and they asked the owner to do that and the owner refused, they could file a complaint with our agency to investigate. I make that an issue because what the law says is it's unlawful to refuse. So in order for there to be a refusal, there needs to be a request. So part of our investigation is, was there a request made? So it doesn't allow people just to drive down the street and cherry pick different businesses they want to sue. There has to be at least some level of engagement, interaction, some expectation that the individual will be using the facility and that they asked for the accommodation and that the accommodation was denied. We engage in a reasonable accommodation analysis on these cases, which means we are looking at what is the cost of the modification compared to what are the resources of this particular business. So it's on a case-by-case basis. It's certainly arguable that captioning would not be something that would necessarily create an undue burden at this point. For somebody who's operating a television screen, most televisions, newer televisions anyway, are now equipped with that feature, or you can address it through the cable provider. So I think owners of establishments that have visual mechanisms in place would be hard pressed to say that this would be unreasonable. But we do take those on a case by basis, and we are analyzing them according to the reasonable accommodation standard. The other thing I was asked to talk about a little bit is our engagement in outreach and education in this area. So I get around, before I used to get around in person. Now I get on all these crazy Zoom and WebEx meetings take forever to get started. But we've done the same thing. It's no different if you were at a DHR operated program right now. You'd have all the same technical challenges. But so we do this virtually now is the upshot. But prior to that, I did get around the state in person quite a bit to meet with different agencies focused on people with disabilities, independent living centers around the state, to share information about how the Division of Human Rights enforces the state human rights law, how people can file complaints, and how the agency operates, and what the law protects and what it doesn't protect in many instances. So certainly a component of that speaks to auxiliary aids and devices. So whether it's captioning or provision of ASL interpretation, sign language interpretation, all of those elements we try to cover when we're doing outreach events. When I'm meeting with groups that are that work for people with disabilities or try to improve the quality of their lives, we do include this as a component of our outreach and education, that there is an obligation on business owners, places that are open to the public, to reasonably accommodate people with disabilities. And in the area of hearing impairments, it can mean providing captioning, it can mean providing sign language interpreting, and it has to be effective. We focus on the language in the statute. The communication must be effective. So oftentimes it doesn't come up with captioning so much, but it does come up in sign language. Is people will say, well, we'll write notes back and forth. Or they'll default to captioning and say, well, we're going to caption the event. And people who rely, as all of the board members here know, people who rely on American Sign Language, that's a different language than the English language. And so captioning may not be effective in that circumstance. And certainly writing notes back and forth wouldn't be either. So we evaluate the cases on the effectiveness of the communication. And that's an important part of looking at it. One last item I want to share with you all is we also have a division initiated investigations unit. That unit can conduct its own investigations and file its own complaints in areas where we see patterns or practices of discrimination. So going forward with this group, I would ask for you to consider us a resource where you see patterns or practices of discrimination. It's challenging, obviously, right now in this environment because a lot of, businesses that, would be otherwise open for entertainment, restaurants, movie theaters, just aren't really open at this point, at least in New York for the most part. However, that will hopefully soon come to an end. And if, certainly within the past year, we can look at something. If something happened within, we have a 1-year statute of limitations. But moving forward, as industries start to reopen, if people see that, there are certain major players out there, major theaters or major, chain restaurants, et cetera, where it's not just fixing one particular establishment, it may be making sure that that particular owner operates all of his or her establishments in the same way. There could be an opportunity to engage our division-initiated investigations unit to address not just the one-off instance of discrimination, but to use the resources they have to address and prosecute cases of discrimination where there are patterns or practices. So that's some of the information I wanted to share. I'm happy to answer any questions. And also, going forward to please be considered a resource. I'll make sure you have my contact information so that we can continue to be of assistance to this community.
Denise?
Thank you very much, John. That was very helpful. Is there any questions?
Yes, Denise, this is Jerry.
Hi, Jerry. I can hear you.
John, hi, you can hear me?
Yes, I can.
It's a pleasure to connect your name with your face. I'm delighted to meet you online, and I thank you for all the good work you've done for the past, better part of a decade that I've been an advocate for people with hearing loss. Speaking about the bill that was adopted in Albany last year that you spoke of, we were disappointed that the requirement is only to provide captioning on TV monitors if an establishment is requested, as you indicated. The obvious situation is in a large restaurant, most chain restaurants, facilities, the people at the consumer contact level, such as waiters and waitresses, doctors and nurses, probably have no clue about this particular law. So the person with hearing loss asks them to turn on the monitors, and they're likely to look at you like you're from Mars. For that reason, there's a piece of legislation that will soon come up for a public hearing in the New York City Council to make the captioning on TV monitors mandatory in all of those public accommodations so that we don't have to go out of our way. People with hearing loss typically have stigma, are embarrassed to bring up anything. They're shy. And so this would deal with that. So I wondered if you have any opinion on that subject, or if you're even aware.
Yes, thank you, Jerry, and it's nice to see you in person as well. I appreciate your kind words. You're right. The way the law is written right now, it requires a request. I encourage people when they, if you get looked at like like you're from Mars and you're effectively being denied the request, I encourage people to file complaints because that's the way to get the establishment's attention. And, behind most restaurants, certainly if it's a chain restaurant, they should have counsel. They should have people who are reviewing policies and protocols. They should be doing trainings. A lot of places that are open for business in New York State have to do trainings around sexual harassment issues. This could be an area where training should be necessary in order to accommodate people with disabilities. I think makes a lot of sense. So I agree that the practicality of having to make the request and having a waiter not know what you're talking about. I would encourage you to persist, to be a good advocate, to ask to speak to a manager. And if you don't get any results there, the best way to get their attention thereafter is to file a complaint.
I agree. I just know from experience that 9 out of 10 people won't do that, which is why we're pushing the bill in New York City.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. The related question. What's being done at the state level to make establishments aware of this requirement?
Well, it's not so as I mentioned earlier, part of my work in outreach and education talks about the law that we enforce, the state human rights law. So the affirmative obligation to caption televisions upon request is in the civil rights law, which is a law that is separate and apart from the New York State human rights law. But the way I tie it in, Jerry, is the way our law is written is that this would fall under the reasonable accommodation requirement. So that if somebody were to go in, while I can't say, hey, we enforce this, we enforce this provision under the civil rights law, we enforce a very similar provision in our law, which prohibits owners of businesses from refusing to reasonably accommodate. And the example of that is exactly what we've been talking about today. Somebody says, can you please put the captioning on the television or arrange for captioning for me? And they get a refusal. That is something we can enforce. So I make that information available to groups such as this, to other groups around the state that I work with, and I work with a great many of them, disability rights groups, so that they can educate members of their community to be out there and understanding, empowering them with knowledge about their rights, so that, and encouraging people to file complaints, really, ultimately, because that's the way we can prosecute these things. But I do make it a component of my outreach and education. I'll continue to do so. And I'll look for opportunities to work with you folks where you think I can be effective in doing that.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. This is Amy. Anybody else have any questions?
I
John,
have a question, more of a comment on this as well. As a hearing care provider, one thing I always share with my clients is to be their best advocate in communication. And as we've had many conversations, whether it be around T-coiling and looping, and making sure that as a consumer, that our clientele, our patients, our customers, however we want to call them, that they have to be the best advocate for this circumstance. So if it takes a matter of giving a complaint, that's one thing. But as a member of the board and as a hearing care provider, what can we do to maybe enhance that situation a little bit? Is it something that we can put together as a board for the providers in the state to let our audiologists and dispensers know that the patient, the client, has to be the one to take the stance for something to be enforced, because that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, the covered entities, I mean, they don't want a lawsuit. The leverage that we have on the covered entities is if you get hit with a lawsuit, you're going to have to pay an attorney and you could end up paying damages in a case. So I like to get the covered entities into a room, and that's more of a challenge. Usually when I do programs, it's either people with disabilities or their advocates that I'm speaking to. But when we have an opportunity to work with covered entities, we really try to take advantage of it. And the angle that we talk about there is insulating yourself from liability. And what does that mean? It means making sure that your staff, that people that work in your office, care providers know that if there's a request for an accommodation, they're obligated to provide it so long as it's reasonable. And you can get into hot water pretty quick if you just hang up the phone, if you just look at somebody like they're from Mars and nothing is done past that. There's a lot of ways, ways I will share with the covered entities as to how I see the complaints as they come in. And a lot of times it's the scenario Jerry mentioned or something you're talking about too. It might be an audiologist who doesn't otherwise know that I have to provide this, or any kind of a healthcare provider. We run into a lot of those issues with ASL interpretation in the healthcare industry. So, it's a matter of persisting. It's a matter of continuing to get word out. We try to draft pamphlets or literature that is both for people with disabilities and also for business owners. So it may be drafting, like I know a few unfortunate times I've ended up, in a healthcare facility, they have a know your rights or a bill of rights. Maybe there should be something there too around people with disabilities and your right to be accommodated, your right to be effectively communicated with. So I think that's a work in progress and needs to be done. And any opportunity you have to move the dime on that, I think has a lot of value.
I have one more question. It's Jerry. Maybe you can answer this briefly. I don't want to take up a lot more time for the meeting. Where does your agency's jurisdiction, how is it different from Disability Rights New York's jurisdiction? I know they have a couple of offices, one in Brooklyn, one upstate. How do we know who to turn to for what?
So we are a New York State agency. We are an enforcement agency. We enforce the New York State human rights law. Disability Rights New York is more of an advocacy group, more of a plaintiff's law firm, lawyers group. So you can certainly, they're a great resource for people with disabilities in the state of New York, and they are typically plaintiff's attorneys. So they represent people with disabilities and oftentimes are doing that before our agency. So our agency, Jerry, is not an advocacy organization, although a lot of the things I hit on and talk about sound like it, but we are a law enforcement agency. So we investigate and prosecute these cases, but we also, when we get the complaint, we allow the respondent to provide a response to the allegations in the complaint. And then we go ahead with investigating it. So to distinguish ourselves from DRNY, we're the law enforcement, we are the court that DRNY would go to. We're the administrative courthouse that DRNY would come to file a complaint. And then we are the adjudicator of that complaint in many ways. But we have remedies at our disposal that state and federal courts have. So stopping the discrimination, compensating an individual who's experienced discrimination, making sure the reasonable accommodation is put into place, whether it's captioning or ASL interpretation, all of those remedies are at our disposal.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, so this is Amy again. John, you provided us a lot of good stuff. I know that our agency often partners with you on other types of discrimination. So this is just another, avenue to, share information between our agencies. So this is really good. And we really appreciate you coming here and providing all that information to our board members.
You're welcome. Thank you, Amy. I'll just emphasize to consider me a resource. I'm going to have to jump off the call, but Amy has my contact information, as does Denise and some others on the call. If you need to reach out to me, feel free to do so. We're happy to be a resource.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.
I wanted to see if Paula was able to join the call again.
Yes, Amy, I joined.
Okay. Paula, do you want to continue? Yep, we can hear
Yes,
you.
I joined by phone. I'm not sure how much you got, so I'll just sort of start from the beginning. I'm Paula O'Brien. I'm the director of the Division of Consumer Protection, which is within the New York State Department of State. Formerly, we were the State Consumer Protection Board and a named ex officio member of the Hearing Aid Advisory Board. And as such, we weighed in on a number of different pieces of legislation at different points previously. We have had a bit of a disconnect since we've come over, so I welcome the opportunity from Amy to connect in with you folks and to share what the Division of Consumer Protection does. So we are John just mentioned that they're not an advocacy organization, and in fact, that's what the Division of Consumer Protection wholly is. We are charged with advocating for consumers statewide. And specifically, our edict in the legislative intent of our statute is to protect consumers from economic harm. So we are always trying to weigh in on state legislation to advance consumer protections, make sure that things are clear and conspicuous and equitable in how consumers engage in the marketplace and how things are offered to them. To that end, we can be of a resource to the board in weighing in. Amy had shared with me a copy of an article here on the maintaining consumer protections for all hearing aids, and it talks about the FDA, the changes in regulations. So in the past, when we were the Consumer Protection Board, we have yet to weigh in as the Division of Consumer Protection, but it's something on our list to re-engage with. We've weighed in on federal regulations with some successes, and everything that is articulated in the article here is, these are all really important protections. So if there's something that you wanted to work towards, moving forward, I welcome that opportunity. And I'm not sure who chairs the board or how you folks organize and who speaks for the board. I don't know. So like I said, I'm re-engaging, and so that's one piece, the advocacy, the policy piece, how we can assist your efforts in there. The other piece is we have a robust outreach and education program statewide. We also, and that's usually done live, but in the COVID-19 format, we've been switching to virtual, and we provide a myriad of consumer protection forums to help inform consumers about engaging in the marketplace and being savvy. We also have the Consumer Assistance Program, which operates a consumer helpline from 8:30 to 4:30 every state working day. And the phone number is 800-627-1220. And any aggrieved consumer can call and parse through any kind of contractual dispute, marketplace concern. And if it's warranted, they can go online and file a complaint, and we will engage in voluntary mediation on their behalf. It should be noted that our complaints volume is up 298% because of COVID. We've had a number of, marketplace complaints because everything's shut down, and there's real tension in between business being able to provide services and stay afloat. So we have education, consumer assistance program, advocacy, and I just buttress John's comments. Please consider the Division of Consumer Protection to be a resource, and I look forward to opening this, serving as a springboard to work together and to engage in more active participation to assist. Thank you.
Thank you,
Any
Paula.
questions?
Thanks for that information. I think it would be great if you could join there's a subcommittee on over-the-counter regulations, federal regulations, and you had indicated that you would, be helpful in reviewing them. So, maybe we can have you join that subcommittee. Would you be interested?
Yeah, and actually, I would, and if I could add Kathy Walter, who's our program counsel, because she would be drafting those responses to the regulations. So it'd be excellent if we could all be in the conversation at the same time.
Okay, I'll have Denise have your names added. And if anybody else has any questions for Paula, now's the time from the board members.
Hi, Paula. This is Ann Orsini. It was really interesting, and I'm so glad to hear that you're willing to help us out. I just wanted to make you aware that we are planning to have a meeting of the subcommittee meeting for the over-the-counter hearing aids within 2 weeks of when the regulations are released. So we're very happy to have you join us and when those regulations come out to help us review them and move forward from there. So welcome.
And thank you. And also as part of, the Division of Consumer Protection is also connected to and a member of the Consumer Federation of America. And so those larger consumer protection advocacy organizations often have different briefing items and they have, I'm sure whatever this group is here, they have a national presence, but just sort of throwing that out there that they may be weighing into, and it's something that we could draw from, but I guess that's a subcommittee topic.
Okay, thank you, Paula. Is there any other comments?
All right, thank you.
All right, thanks, Paula. You added a lot of good information to this board meeting. I'm really happy with the last 2 action items. You both provided a lot of good information, questions that have often been asked by our board members. So thanks to John and to Paula for coming to this meeting. So the next item is the next board meeting. Right now it's slated for, I'm going to let Denise talk about this one.
Our next board meeting will be Monday, December 7th at 1 p.m. If you have any agenda items for us, please send me an email. Sometime in the last quarter, I will be sending out emails to find out our dates for 2021, our board meeting dates and your availability. And that's it.
Okay, so that's the last thing on our agenda. So I would like to move forward with adjournment of this meeting. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everybody for joining, and I apologize for that technical. This is our first meeting with the hearing aid board and trying to tie it all together with a caption and everything, and I apologize for any technical difficulties, but it seems like we've got a lot of good information that was provided at this meeting. So thank you, and I call to adjourn this meeting right now.
Quick question going back to the beginning of our meeting, though. We were having difficulty whether or not we were able to form a quorum. And we're still looking to get more attendance and participation from our governor's office. What is the word and status on getting the extra audiologists, the 2 hearing aid dispensers, et cetera, that our governor appointed? Where are we on that?
That is handled by the governor's office, but if you guys have any names of anybody who's interested or want to send us information, we take it. We forward it to the appropriate office, and they make the reviews and the recommendations.
So we don't know if there are any. We don't know if there's anybody already presented, or is it a matter of no one's put their name forward?
We can find out that information, and Denise can send it out. I'm not sure exactly. That isn't our office that handles that. We forward it to the appropriate appointments office, and they make that determination, and they don't necessarily always get back to us until there is an appointment. But we can definitely look into it.
Okay.
Denise, this is Jerry. Can you give us an update on the number of vacancies our board currently has?
Yes. In your folder, there should be the the Hearing Aid Dispensing Advisory Board member list, and it
Yep.
says all the voting members. So anywhere that you see the vacancies on that, actually, it would be an attachment that I sent you with the email. That would have been our folder contents had we been meeting in person. Right, I sent it to you in the email. It's an attachment, but there is, I can go over them. There is a non-audiologist hearing aid dispenser that's vacant, and the appointing authority would be the governor.
Mhm.
There is a public member who represents adults over age 50, which is vacant. The appointing authority is the governor. There's an otolaryngologist vacancy, which would be appointed by the governor. There is a non-audiologist hearing aid dispenser, which is vacant, appointing authority, also the governor. A public member vacancy, appointing authority, Senate Minority Leader. And I believe that's it.
Tell us, have candidates that are being vetted in the pipeline.
I can't.
What do you think?
Are there any candidates that are being vetted?
Yeah, we don't know. That's outside of what we, how we handle it. We would just forward it on to the appropriate office. And they make the determination for vetting and whatnot. And then they come back to us when there's somebody appointed. They don't really keep us updated if somebody's in the pipeline.
Okay.
Right.
So we do, if you have information, any candidates or that kind of stuff, we do forward it on from us to that agency.
Or up for consideration.
Excuse me?
Are you aware of any candidates who've come forward for any of those positions whose candidacy is being considered?
No, I don't know.
Yes, you are. That's not true. That's not accurate.
Jerry, we know what members might send in and that we would forward, but that's usually all we're aware of until the point that we're notified of an appointment to the board from one of the appointing authorities. So right now, as it stands, it looks like we have 5 vacancies for the voting board members.
Okay.
I'm still unsure of how many of those 5 vacancies have you received interest in serving?
None of them are appointed by the Secretary of State, which is our office.
No, I believe they're all appointed now from the governor's office. Is there any way to get word to that department and say, I think we should get it filled? Can they take action?
We can check to see. I mean, Dave, are you aware? Dave Mossberg, are you aware of how that works?
Generally, all the appointments, I believe, go through the governor's appointment office. So, other than that, unfortunately, it's not really something that, the Department of State is generally aware of, or at least certainly I'm not.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what Dave said.
Sorry, so what I was saying is I understood the question was about, the department's role or involvement in the appointment of board members. Is that right?
Correct, Dave.
And so, my understanding of the process is that these decisions are made by sort of a special part of the governor's office called the Governor's Appointments Council's office. And so, those decisions are generally made there. And so I am not, involved in that process at all. So unfortunately, I don't know much more other than, these decisions are generally left to the Appointments Council of the Governor's Office.
Would it not be appropriate for the dispensing board staff to get some information from the governor's office as to whether any of these 5 vacancies have people under consideration?
We can find out to see if there's any information. I'm not sure that we will have anything, but we will definitely look into it, Jerry.
Okay, because we don't want to be nominating or going out of our way to seek candidates for positions that are already being considered before the governor's off by the governor.
Okay. We'll see that if there's anything pending, if they will give us any information. That there's no guarantee, but we will check with our
Thank you.
Yeah, can I just ask a quick question? It's Tony Massara. I'd like to know, the vacancies are all non-audiologist hearing aid dispensers. I mean, can that be changed, or does it have to stay that type of a board member?
I can answer that question. So the board itself is created by a specific provision of the general business law. And in the general business law itself, it specifies the exact number of board members being 13, and then the specific breakdown of, who is allowed to be seated on the board and their specific appointment process. And it also includes, the ex officio members. So any change to the composition or the method of appointment requires an act of the legislature. So,
okay.
I mean, the answer to your question in theory is yes, but it is beyond the department's, powers to change. It's a statutory requirement.
Okay. Just opening it up because we want to get some more people on the board, because we spend a lot of time, coming to the meetings, and then we don't have a quorum, and that's happened a lot of times where we don't have a quorum all the time. So, just throwing it out there, I guess. If we could have maybe what you said, it needs an act of the legislature to change it. So I guess we're kind of stuck.
I think we just need an act. I think we just need an act of the people responsible to get the names passed through to the governor, and go from there. Because it's 2 non-audiologists, a ENT, an otolaryngologist, and another consumer advocate. So that would be nice to get. Was there anything, curiosity, is there anything from our public, anybody in our public group that has comment about meeting today?
No, that's not part of the agenda.
Oh, okay.
So as of right now, we're going to move forward with adjourning the meeting, and we'll look into your questions. And the next scheduled meeting is December 7th.
So.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Denise.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Take care, everybody. Be safe.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.